Good morning and welcome to today's webinar, Data Availability with Data Confidence, How to Get Cross-Functional Reporting with an Enterprise Data Warehouse. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. Can you change the next slide, please? We've taken a screenshot of the attendee interface. You should see something that looks like this on your own computer desktop with a control panel in the upper right-hand corner. Next slide, please. You're listening in by using your computer speaker system by default. If you would prefer to join over the phone, just select telephone in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. Next slide, please. You will have the opportunity to submit questions to our presenter by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation, and we will collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Also in your control panel, we have 3 handouts in the handout section that you can view that relate to this webinar. We've got a white paper, a service overview, and a case study for your review. So thank you for joining, and I'd now like to introduce Christian Screen, Global Analytics Practice Director and VP at DataVail.
Hi everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar. We have a fantastic agenda lined up for you in this webinar, talking about data availability and data confidence, cross-functional analytics using an enterprise data warehouse. And for our agenda, we're talking about how well you might know your data, trying to understand a little bit about basic metrics on how to measure your business accurately, the importance of an enterprise data warehouse, data confidence and the importance of data reconciliation, and of course, how to get started with the cross-functional analytics within your organization. Just quickly, I'd like to give you an overview about DataVail. At DataVail, we're specialists in databases, analytics, and data integration. We have over 600 DBAs, 200 developers, and consultants, and we offer onshore, offshore, hybrid managed services and consulting on a 24/7 model. With over 7 years average customer lifespan, we have over 300 customers that we've engaged with in managed services and projects over the years. And that's over 13 years of delivering data services. At our core, we're all about data management at DataVail. We offer services around a wide variety of software vendor tools in the DBA space, the data warehouse and business analytics space. We offer package solutions, DevOps, application management, EBS support. And we've also invested a lot in enabling technology through our IP. We bring in the best talent, and we've invested a lot in our organization across the board to make sure that we can satisfy your data management needs. We also have several ISO certifications that help ensure and provide confidence working relationship with our customers, which often satisfies your chief security officer's requirements and desires for a preferred vendor. With a range of services, we're able to assist your data management needs through project services, including Oracle Analytics and Hyperion Consulting, Microsoft BI Consulting, health check assessments, upgrades, and data migrations. We're able to assist with operational managed services, incidents, responses with SLAs and database and application monitoring, proactive services like health checks and tuning services, as well as reviews. And from a data development service capability, we provide development, tuning, automation, data warehouse building and optimization, and as I mentioned previously, DevOps and continued integration automation services. Well, I think getting into the presentation, as we're talking about data management in the enterprise data warehouse, it often boils down to how well do you really know your data? And if you think about your organization or organizations you've been at previously, many of us need data and reporting to do our jobs. And that data can come from Excel spreadsheets, databases that help run our organization, outside data services, information from third-party vendors. And that's often compiled or analyzed by financial analysts and business analysts. They wind up taking that information and maybe compiling it into further Excel files that are used for some type of reporting or management review, or through an analytics tool and providing graphs, charts, and dashboard functionality. And that all should technically go to management of the lines of business, such as the HR director, so forth and so on, the CIO, the CEO. And ultimately, that information gets to that executive level so that these individuals have answers on how the organization is doing, and then also how to improve the organization. They would then take that information and provide it to the street, for example, if they're a public company. They use that information to guide and move the organization in a direction. Hopefully that's a positive direction. And also it helps them bring out subtleties in their information and about their business to help them create market advantages and ultimately to make the organization more profitable. And when we're able to check that box on getting that information out and using it to control the business, that gets us in pretty good shape. But what happens when these decision makers only have part of the data or half the data or just a portion of it, or it's questionable where that data that they really need is actually coming from? So the availability of that data goes into question. And when that happens, it's very difficult to have confidence or accurate information to present to the world about your business for your shareholders, owners' equity, and so forth, or to provide a correct path for your organization that puts it in a forward-looking strategic direction. And that, of course, impacts profitability and how efficient the organization is able to make money. And of course, because these decision makers, such as your C-suite executives, are unable to make those decisions, it's going to in turn impact their career and their position in the organization. So it becomes very important that the executive management have this capability to look at the organization. And we're not just talking about financial data, we're talking about data that happens to be from sales or payroll or labor, and of course finance and accounting. One of the key factors to your data being out there somewhere and using it efficiently and effectively has to do with the timeliness of the data. That data has to be available when you need it based on the sources that it's coming from, so that you can utilize that data and thus information in a way that serves your purposes to guide the business. The data also needs to be secure. Two heads are better than one, and ultimately you want more people to help you make decisions about your organization. And based on the security of the data, individuals throughout different parts of the organization should be looking at the same data, one source of the true system, and that data should be able to be secured at different levels or based on different roles or authorization. And then of course, availability of the data is very important, as we discussed. If you know the data is out there somewhere, but it's not available to you, or it's not available to you in the way that you need it, the format that you need it, then you're also going to be at a disadvantage. And one of the last points that organizations also struggle with is the perspective of the data, the point of view of the data, meaning that the data might be at a very granular event transaction-based level of detail, but the way you might need to see that data in order to be effective and to make decisions might be at a much more aggregate or just a general slice of that data in order to be really relevant, so that your time is not wasted in analyzing and sifting through the data. And when you have a difficult time just getting to the data, then that's just problematic, because you wind up with maybe just a portion of the data, or the time you spend trying to get to the data might not seem very valuable in the output that it's delivering. So then one might tend to give up on that approach to getting the data from the correct sources. And that's where a lot of creative accounting can come into play. And this time is money that you're wasting in sifting through data and trying to find the correct way to get at the data that you know is out there. And some organizations rush through this and they try to build quick solutions, and they incur a decent amount of technical debt. But incurring technical debt isn't leverage in getting you answers. But what we're really looking at is the opportunity cost that comes with getting this data into a central location with an enterprise perspective that holistically gives you a view of how your organization is doing, how it's performing. And that business case is going to really drive and enable this idea of what executives should desire to have and obtain in their organization, which is really a 360-degree management overview or dashboard, if you will, that enables them to run the business. And at DataVail, we're true believers in providing this capability that provides a positive impact to the general ledger. And think of things like the DuPont framework as an analytics deliverable, and that's achievable within an enterprise data warehouse, and definitely capable of giving you value when you're looking across the business. And one of the reasons we talk about just adding value to the overall organization by providing this enterprise perspective is because you need to measure your business accurately. Even at the base metrics, you would come to think your organization should be able to answer fairly quickly. But lots of organizations are struggling with this idea of measuring their business. It's very common for businesses to not know how they're performing. There's billion-dollar companies out there that cannot answer basic questions about their business. Things like how many units were sold of a specific product, or what's the current headcount of our FTEs within the organization. And is there high employee turnover, payables turnover, receivables turnover? Do you know? And then what's the cost of our items sold? And what's maybe gross profit by branch or business unit? What's the output? And it even gets more complicated for some organizations if you try to slice that or look at a different or a single perspective or point of view of the organization, perhaps by region of the business, that sort of thing. And why do we need this? Well, it's important at any point in time to know how your business is doing, so that you know where it needs to go, where you need to take corrective action in order to guide the business to profitability and be the most efficient. And that brings us to one of our poll questions that we have for you. Do you struggle to answer these types of questions in your organization? So quite a few organizations do struggle with this in their organization. An enterprise data warehouse can help mitigate the inability to answer those questions and actually provide you with those answers in a very regimented manner. Lots of organizations also look at operational reporting in order to help them guide the business, but operational reporting is just very tactical. Manufacturing organizations look at operational reporting to understand pick lists that are going for the day and what needs to be shipped on a daily basis. But looking strategically and understanding how the organization needs to prove over time or holistically, trend analysis of how the organization fared quarter over quarter, year over year, that's very important information that the C-suite, management suite needs to understand. And a lot of times, organizations will rush into try to fix this solution by creating one-off data silos, spreadsheet databases, quick fix solutions, and perhaps because of lack of in-house skills, it's preventing an organization to have this accurate, automated data, especially from being accessible to the people who need it the most. And it's kind of like a puzzle. How do you fit these pieces together? If you have multiple sources of data and multiple people that need to look at the correlation of how one area of the business impacts another, it can be quite complicated seemingly. But in order to get a proper solution, it's okay to ask for help, obviously from all areas of the organization, but also from outside, looking at the experts who've done this before across many of different industries and different types of organizations. In-house, you really need to look at the executive level and the priority business unit leaders, such as your HR director and so forth, in order to address the problem and seek a solution. And often that solution is an enterprise data warehouse that looks at your organization holistically. Well, you've heard me talk about that. So let's look at the importance of an enterprise data warehouse, or an EDW, and why you need one that works. And developing one the first time and getting it right the first time is also of equal importance. One of the key factors of an EDW, an enterprise data warehouse, is the perspective of data and how you look at it. We call this a point of view. This point of view might be specific to your line of business, but we refer to this as dimensionality. The dimensionality of the data, how it's looked at from different angles. You can also call this the slicing and dicing of data. It often includes things like hierarchies, point in time references, snapshots of the data, or a snapshot of in time or point of view. Also looking at historical data. Maybe the data warehouse stores data for 2-3 years. We have some organizations where they need to store data for 7 to 10 years, maybe due to some sort of regulatory compliance. And then also security, as we mentioned earlier, is very, very important to the overall perspective and confidence in the data. When you're using Excel spreadsheets, think about how consistent, secure, timely, and relevant is your data when you need to ship reports around to the management individuals in the organization that need the data, that need to react to the data. Do those Excel spreadsheets contain all this sort of dimensionality and these types of points of view? Probably not. And Excel spreadsheets is one of the reasons why companies don't have confidence in their data, and they have 2 or 3 full-time employees spending the majority of their time throughout the week compiling these Excel spreadsheet databases that get shipped around. And there's lots of room for manual error in shipping around Excel spreadsheets. So we want to try to avoid that and build something we can automate and structure. Let's look a little further into what I'm talking about. Well, when you slice and dice the data your way, you get to see the data that's relevant to you, but you have a consistent set of facts and metrics that apply to the entire organization. And if we look at these different points of view, such as point in time reference, so maybe we want to look at our data based on how a sales rep was assigned a territory during the first quarter of the year, but they changed territory at the second quarter of that year. And we can look at the data based on either when that rep had prior changed the territory or after they changed the territory, and we can look at performance that way. The same thing would go for any employee in the company from an HR perspective. What happens when an employee's job role or job title or their salary increased or decreased? We can also look by date and all sorts of granularity within the date, year, month, quarter, day, and we can take a snapshot of that data so that we can see that point of view as if it's frozen in time, and we can even isolate that and drill down to certain points of view in that snapshot of data. We can even look at historical data. So perhaps we have legacy data that's coming from an antiquated system, and we've perhaps migrated that old ERP system to a new ERP system, and we have new dimensionality and new perspectives in the new ERP system, but that's not relevant to the old system. So we can actually load historic data into an enterprise data warehouse, look at some of the same facts and metrics, but just reduce or increase the types of point of views, dimensions that we're looking at that data across. Then there's also security. So in this particular example, what if there's only certain customers that employee number 1 is able to look at, and maybe one of the C-level individuals is only able to look at retail customers only versus online customers or something similar to that. A sales manager is only able to look at their sales team and how they're doing related to their sales incentives. Or you're in a specific business unit within the organization, your department, so you can only see the profit and loss statement information for your department, and you can't look at any other department's profit and loss information that's coming out of the centralized data warehouse. And one of the last, but probably the most relevant and the most common, is hierarchies and the principle of the hierarchy structure. A data warehouse enables you to have dimensionality where you can have a very concerted, holistic organizational chart, and hierarchies can cross really any type of point of view. That could go into territory management, such as U.S. Northeast, drilling down to specific states, drilling down to specific cities, or org chart where you have corporate, region, district, branch, location. And an enterprise data warehouse would even enable you to have multiple hierarchies that drill down and represent the same underlying detail, but it's aggregated or rolled up only within the hierarchy that you need to see it by. So these points of view are very, very relevant as we look at an enterprise data warehouse and as you need to look across the business in its entirety. And if you build an enterprise data warehouse with a solid foundation that enables it to be scalable within the organization, then you actually wind up with something that's almost a force multiplier, where you're in a very straightforward manner, able to append or add on different subject areas, perspectives within the business, such as payroll, or such as a different area of finance or accounting, invoicing, inventory, so forth and so on. So you can actually start building your enterprise data warehouse maybe with something as finance. So you would have maybe the finance subject area be the starting or the impetus behind this project of an enterprise data warehouse, and then you could scale out with relative ease because you've desired to have a holistic, concerted, conformed perspective of how you measure the business. So to look at another poll question for you as an attendee, if you could, let us know which of these 5 perspectives is the most important to your business. Which one of these points of view is very relevant to your business currently? Okay, thank you for those responses. Well, it looks like a lot of you are focused on looking at hierarchies, and that might be a challenge for a lot of companies, and we do see that as well. Also, adding on to the importance of an enterprise data warehouse is the idea of summarizing the data, aggregating the data, drilling down into the data. One of the more important things is managing by exception. Instead of searching through loads of data, looking for problems, looking for issues, an enterprise data warehouse can facilitate the process of having automated exceptions delivered to you by some sort of email automation or some other form of notification, because it's creating information and compiling information that's consistent, it's automated, and you can create potentially thresholds that if specific ratios or specific values or variances breach these thresholds, then it can help your systems trigger an alert. And then now you're acting on a more actionable type of data structure versus you having to dig through manually. And again, time is money. Also, drilling into lower level detail is very important, especially as we talk to some of our customers in the financial FP&A area of the organization. Just the ability to drill from account into subledger detail transaction events is very important. Just to kind of illustrate an example here, if we're looking at a P&L, a profit and loss statement here, and we're looking at a cash account, well, maybe we're looking at this P&L broken down by a slice of a territory, looking at one of the hierarchies in the org point of view dimension, and we're looking at the Northwest region for the first period of the year for 2017 and 2016, but we see an increase in 2017 for one of the sub accounts. And we want to understand what are the events and transactions that created that aggregation and that summation. Well, the enterprise data warehouse would allow us to drill down into that subledger detail so that we could understand the information that aggregates and rolls up in to create that P&L as we see it today. And this type of comparative analysis, but also this type of investigative analysis, allows us to get quicker answers to our solutions, or quicker answers to how our business is doing. So imagine you're the VP of Finance or CFO, or even the manager or director of your region, and you want this information. The aim is not to have to put in a request and wait for 3 days to get this information. The aim is to have this information at your fingertips, and the ability to give you the confidence that if you drill down into that data or you look at that data, you're able to get it quickly and it's going to be accurate. And the only way you can get to that level of confidence is to have certifiable data that has integrity, and that data is available, and it's been well vetted by your organization and the individuals that know that data very well. And how do we get that data confidence? If I could show you an illustration example of a high-level logical structure that showcases how this is possible, I think you'll get a bit of the gist or understanding of how we can make that possible for your organization as well. Organizations have lots of different data feeds, sometimes even outside of the organization's central ERP system. Take a retail or restaurant organization where a lot of their revenue generating systems are in the actual retail or restaurant location, such as point of sale systems. So we might have a situation where we are bringing that information, that sales data, over into across the firewall into our data centers. And we're combining that information potentially with either our CRM systems or our ERP systems. And at this point, the enterprise data warehouse is of course a very vendor and technology agnostic process. So it really doesn't matter what ERP system you have, if it's Microsoft Dynamics or Oracle PeopleSoft or EBS. At this point, it doesn't matter. We're just talking about moving the data and putting it into a holistic, centralized container called the Enterprise Data Warehouse. And we would move that data from the source systems using ETL processes, ETL's extract, transform, and load. And we'd also move it into what we call an ODS, an operational data store. Now this is really relevant, and I'll show you why here in a few seconds. Because we're able to move that data either in a nightly batch process while most people are sleeping, or even incrementally throughout the day. A lot of our customers want to see general ledger data, especially towards close, maybe loaded into that data warehouse every 2 hours throughout that close period. So that becomes very relevant as well, how quickly we're ingesting that data and pulling it in from the source systems into the enterprise data warehouse so that we can have quick, near real-time analytics and data management capabilities. Well, once we have the data being loaded into those structures, we do have different logical and physical structures to help us store the data in a manner that gives us those point of view perspectives. So this is a very curated design and development process that's undertaken, but the goal is really to get to a point where it's fairly straightforward for your CFO and the other lines of business managers are able to reconcile the data. This is very, very critical to an organization. And I think most CFOs would agree. And the ODS, what this does is it helps us to refer back to our source system data, because if we're coming from multiple source systems, we need really one source system that we can go into for operational reporting. And we want one system such as the EDW to go into for analytical or our strategic reporting. Having an ODS also helps us so that we're not impacting the performance of our source systems. Lots of customers out there today are actually doing reporting directly against the source systems, and that can have a negative impact on your actual business that is generating revenue for you. So we use this process of an ODS and an EDW to really help streamline the organization. As I said, really any analytics tool that you might be utilizing today can then pull data in a reporting fashion into or from the enterprise data warehouse into that tool. And pulling from the enterprise data warehouse gives you this masterful look at the data, a high level, aggregated, very well defined, very well constructed point of view reference set of data that the company knows they can go to any time because it is certified, it's validated, and it's the way that the business is viewed as it's been declared by the executives and the line of business managers. And then also, you're able to get to the detailed data. So we showed the drill down example from the profit and loss statement earlier. That is possible using this type of approach to an enterprise data warehouse. Once again, that gives us reconciliation capability, even so much that you can automate that reconciliation process. So if something were to happen within the data stream that was unforeseeable by the organization, you could have automated reports generated for you on a nightly basis that go out to the stakeholders of this process and this data, even before they get into the office in the morning, that says, wait a minute, there might be something invalid or incorrect with the data worth researching, or it could be used to trigger a process that does an automated reconciliation. And that might be a little advanced for this conversation. And then also, because we have this very concentrated enterprise view of the data stored in our enterprise data warehouse, and we have that one source of the truth, once we have that core data repository, we can even spin off what we call data marts, or different subject areas or different universes of data, such as finance, marketing, and HR. And if we have some type of cube technology, such as Hyperion Essbase, or we have Microsoft Analysis Services cubes, we can even load those cubes from our enterprise data warehouse. Now that gives us a very safe mechanism for giving us confidence in the data that's being loaded to that cube. Or if you have Hyperion Planning, for example, you can also use the enterprise data warehouse to load some of the actuals that are coming from the enterprise data warehouse into your Hyperion or your planning application. And then, of course, the cube, depending on what type of tool you're using for analytics, can also feed the analytics tool. And this is giving you a very, very comprehensive view of the overall organization from a data streaming management perspective. It helps mitigate any data pipeline sprawl. And it's also really a force multiplier, because you're getting this very strong infrastructure for managing your data and looking at your organization holistically. One of the last things to point out is our little purple banner below, data governance and security. So this whole process is covered in the veil, the shield of data governance and security. So that both of those very important principles of changing our KPIs, making sure that individuals in the company know what our data meta dictionary is, where it is, what it looks like, and it is part of this process. And security is part of this process as well. So we need to know the overall security aspect of our data and who can access it and how it's controlled. And so an enterprise data warehouse gives you all these aspects and variables, which is extremely important. Well, getting started with this process is key. We often talk to customers that ask the question, how do I get started? And there's really an opportunity cost of not incorporating an enterprise data warehouse. So it's something that you want to get started on even in the smallest amounts moving forward, and really as soon as possible if this is a gap in your organization. And the ways that Datavale can really assist in this process, because we've done this for many organizations, we can, number one, do things like tool selections to help you as an organization identify things like what type of analytics tool would the organization be looking at, what would best serve the purposes for your unique business, and what type of data transformation tool is relevant or is very important and will grow with the organization. We also incorporate into our services a data warehouse and business analytics roadmap strategy plan. A lot of companies have a general idea of where they want to go. Some have no idea. And so either way, this plan helps you see 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, 5 years down the road. And working with our experts in data warehousing and business intelligence, we're able to help assess your organization, help assess the technology you've already invested in, help understand where your business needs to go, and we can even help understand your particular industry to help you provide some market differentiators and help you grow into that and provide the analytics that will help you be a strong competitor and leader in your area. We can even help develop the business cases for developing an enterprise data warehouse in your organization. Lots of organizations struggle with the aspect of, well, do we need a data warehouse? Maybe you have a finance data mart or a revenue data mart currently in your organization, but you struggled with that and you need to know how to expand into a much broader, holistic enterprise data warehouse. DataVeil can assist there as well. Of course, with the design and development of an enterprise data warehouse, that's something that DataVeil is very, very well versed in and can help you build a structure that's scalable, that's going to last over time and be able to roll in different aspects of concepts you hear buzzwords about today, such as big data and data lakes. So these are all concepts where you really need to start with an enterprise data warehouse and to understand those principles and how they can help your organization before you dive headfirst into a data lake concept or a big data concept. And then lastly, and often a very quick place to get started with understanding not only where you're going, but also how your current system is performing, especially compared to other companies that are maybe similar to you or within the same industry. And that's something of a health check of those existing systems and existing reporting systems. That's kind of one of the painless quick starters that really helps you get going with the overall holistic enterprise data warehouse perspective that this webinar has been about. Feel free to reach out to me at any point in time. Again, I am the Global Analytics Practice Director for DataVeil. I'll leave my email address here on the screen so that you can reach out to me anytime if you have any questions. I do believe a recording of this webinar will be available on our DataVeil website. And now I'd like to hand it back over to our team for some question and answer.
Thank you, Christian. We're now going to begin answering the questions that have been submitted during today's presentation. As a reminder, you can still submit questions through the questions pane in your attendee control panel. So I'm going to hand it over to Jane, my co-organizer, with our first question.
Okay, Christian, first question, how do I know where my data is stored?
Well, that is a good question. How do you know where your data is stored? Very valid. And as I mentioned, a lot of organizations struggle with knowing where their data is, but most companies know where their data is stored. If you're looking at running the actual business, an ERP system, enterprise resource planning system, such as Microsoft Dynamics or PeopleSoft or Workday or Oracle Cloud, Oracle EBS. These are systems, but it really might depend on your line of business. You might be the HR director, and a lot of your information about what you're concerned about is in Taleo. So it often becomes a question of how available is that underlying data to you, and what other systems do you need to support the true information that you need, right? So what data do you need to compile and consolidate in order to turn that data into information? And then how do you want to structure that information that provides you the insights you need? And so that is really the business question.
Okay, awesome, thank you. Second question, how long does it take to build an enterprise data warehouse?
Another very valid question and good question at that. Building an enterprise data warehouse, I hate to use the analogy about building a house, but it's a very similar concept in the way that you want to build a solid foundation. You hear that adage kind of time and time again. And one of the things you can look at is what you've done internally so far. In every organization differs. Have you already tried to build a data mart or data warehouse and you see that that's very siloed and you're struggling with the in-house skills to expand upon it, but you know there's a need? So how do you take that and really pretty much do a data warehouse modernization and retool a little bit so that you expand that? Or do you start from scratch where you know you need a solution, you know an enterprise data warehouse holistic view of the company is what you need, so how do you get started? And so some of that involves talking with the business, talking with IT, doing business requirements and requirements gathering and design. So getting into that process, you know, we've seen enterprise data warehouses start with one subject area, and usually that's the one that needs the most help, where there's no information, there's no data about that part of the business. Oftentimes that's finance, but it can be even whittled down to a smaller subset of finance, such as revenue or sales. And so if you take the aspect of building an enterprise data warehouse so that it's comprehensive, and then you start with one subject area, such as revenue or you know, finance in general, that helps you to fine-tune the plan of action. So we've seen enterprise data warehouses go in the range of 3 to 6 months and build out that infrastructure, get the tooling in place, and even then have a deployable subject area as kind of a phase one for you know, like I said, a selected priority candidate subject area such as revenue, sales, or finance.
Okay, great. Thank you for the detailed answer. I thought this question was interesting. This person has a data mart, but they want to know, how does a data mart differ from an enterprise data warehouse?
I love answering this question. You can almost think of these different data silos and reporting structures as a stepping ladder. You can think of, you know, the core operational data system being kind of at the bottom. It's the most granular. If you go up one more level, you might have someone who's created something of an Excel spreadsheet database or something that they compile from that operational data and send out to some business users or executives on a weekly or monthly basis. If you go up one level from the Excel spreadsheet database and that type of distribution with you know, some nice graphs and reports, you go up to one more level and say, well, that manual work that person or these people are doing to generate these, you know, Excel reports, it's menial. It takes up too much time. So let's automate that process and get some more confidence in the data. So they might create a data mart. And usually a data mart is a very siloed process or siloed system where you might look and create a subject area based silo for revenue, for example. So we have customers who have a revenue data mart, but that only gives you the perspective and the point of view of revenue. And so if you're looking at something more of a data warehouse, an enterprise data warehouse, you know, taking the next step up the ladder, you get to something of a data warehouse where the organization has said, well, we need to look at both revenue and then maybe also inventory. Okay, and maybe there's a correlation for this particular business. So that's kind of going up the ladder, and it's still somewhat siloed. Some organizations have 2 data marts, and they call that their data warehouse. But then as you reach towards the top of this ladder, this stepping the stepping ladder, you get to the enterprise data warehouse. And the difference in the enterprise data warehouse and the rest is that you're looking at a holistic perspective of the organization. You're looking at having one chart of accounts, one list of customers that go across the business, one set of employees, one set of org chart and hierarchies. And you can really only achieve that with an enterprise data warehouse, having said we need to do better as an organization and look across the entire organization, understand correlations, but at the same time provide governance and security to this process that is automated and gives us confidence, the availability of the data we need, and the access of the data to the people that need to have it.
Okay, great. Awesome answer. Final question, who should we talk to about getting an enterprise data warehouse built?
Well, I think anyone listening to this webinar is definitely in the right place. Definitely reach out to our analytics and data warehousing team here at DataVail. We have a solution that fits just about every organization, every industry, and it's fairly straightforward to get going on the right path. And I think organizations, once they're able to get towards an enterprise data warehouse or get an enterprise data warehouse rolled out, they'll wonder how they lived without it, and they'll understand the opportunity cost of having completed a data warehouse, enterprise data warehouse initiative.
Perfect. That is all the questions we have.
All right. Well, thank you, Christian, for answering all the questions, and thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar. If you have other questions, please contact Christian Screen. His information there is on the screen right now. And on behalf of DataVail and Christian, thank you for joining us today. Have a great rest of the day. Bye.